Welcome to America Current Affairs. Today, we're diving deep into Minneapolis, a city that is right now on the absolute brink. I mean, we're talking about a crisis that's unfolding that could seriously challenge the very foundation of American justice. So yeah, let's get right into it. So, let's set the scene. January 13th, 2026. On this day, something happened that wasn't just another headline. No, this sent a shockwave, a real tremor, right through the heart of the US justice system, specifically in Minnesota.
And you see, this wasn't just one isolated incident. Think of it like the first domino to fall in a massive chain reaction. A reaction triggered by a really stunning move from inside the government itself. And it all boils down to a single, simple number: 6.
6, that's the number. 6 senior federal prosecutors in Minneapolis just walked off the job, all at once, on the same day. And listen, we're not talking about rookies or junior staff here. These were the pros, the most experienced, high-ranking lawyers whose entire job is to uphold federal law for the state of Minnesota. And they just...
And here's why that is such a massive, massive deal. These are career professionals, okay? Not political appointees who come and go. These are people who have dedicated their entire lives to the justice system. For them to just up and walk away like this, that's like a 5-alarm fire for the legal world. In fact, a former federal prosecutor, a guy named Doug Kelly, he put it pretty bluntly. He called it the darkest day for the rule of law that he'd seen in his entire 50-year career. I mean, 50 years. That tells you something.
So you gotta ask, right? What on earth could possibly push 6 dedicated public servants to abandon their posts all at the same time? I mean, that just doesn't happen. It screams crisis of conscience. To really get to the bottom of it, we have to rewind the clock just a little bit, just a few days, to a really tragic and fatal encounter on a snowy street in Minneapolis.
And this is the moment that ignited everything. We're talking about the fatal shooting of a US citizen, a woman named Renee Good.
Okay, so let's walk through what happened on January 7th. Renee Good, who was a 37-year-old mother of 3, a poet, she has this encounter with federal agents. And things escalate incredibly fast. We're talking minutes. At 9:37 in the morning, as her SUV starts to move, an ICE agent named Jonathan Ross fires 3 shots, and she's killed. But what happened right after that is just as chilling. Apparently a bystander, who's actually a physician, tried to rush in and give her medical aid, but reports say he was blocked by the agents on the scene, just blocked from helping.
And this right here is where we get 2 completely different stories. The official account, coming from the Department of Homeland Security, is that the agent feared for his life, that he was actually struck by her SUV, and that this was all self-defense. But that's just not what videos and witness accounts seem to show. Not at all.
In fact, when you look at the video analysis from a bunch of different sources, it looks like the agent was still standing, and that he fired as Renee Good was turning her car away from him. So you see this huge contradiction, right? And that brings up a really big question. Why were there so many federal agents? We're talking hundreds of ICE agents on the ground in Minneapolis in the first place.
Well, the answer to that is a massive federal operation that was called Operation Metro Surge. And you have to understand, this wasn't some routine action. This thing was huge. It was launched back in December of 2025, and the Department of Homeland Security itself called it the largest ever carried out. The largest ever.
So what was this giant operation even about? Well, officially, the stated goals were pretty clear. First, to go after what they called widespread financial fraud in state programs. Second, to specifically link that alleged fraud to immigrant communities. And third, to back all of this up by putting a force of more than 2,000 federal agents on the streets. And that operation, that huge federal presence, that's the thread that ties all of this together. It brings us right back to those 6 prosecutors. It brings us to the exact moment they decided they just couldn't be a part of the system they had sworn their lives to serve anymore.
Yeah, for people like Joe Thompson, who was actually the lead prosecutor on the very fraud cases this whole operation was built on, this was the breaking point. Sources are saying they were being pressured hard to do things that just violated their conscience. Things like opening a criminal investigation into Renee Good's widow, directives to treat her shooting only as an assault on a federal officer, and to completely ignore any potential civil rights violations. And to top it all off, the FBI was apparently freezing state and local investigators completely out of the investigation into her death. So you can see why they felt this way. They believed they were being pushed to use their power not for actual justice, but to push a specific political story. And that was a line they wouldn't cross.
And as news of the shooting and then these resignations started to spread, well, the city of Minneapolis, a place that has very vivid memories of what happened with George Floyd, just erupted.
And to really understand the tension on the ground there, you've just got to look at the numbers. They really put it all into perspective. So the Minneapolis police force, about 600 officers. St. Paul, roughly the same. So together, that's about 1,200 local cops for the entire Twin Cities area. Now, look at the number of federal agents deployed, over 2,000. They weren't just there to assist. They outnumbered the local police almost 2 to 1. You can imagine for the people living there, it probably felt less like law enforcement and a lot more like a military occupation. And as you can probably guess, the city just exploded. Thousands of people poured out into the streets, and you could feel the anger. What started as protests very quickly turned into confrontations. We saw tense clashes between demonstrators and federal agents, who then responded with things like tear gas and pepper spray. Yeah, the situation just spiraled. People were getting hurt, arrests were being made, and the whole city became this flashpoint of conflict. And it wasn't just the protesters. State and local leaders were practically begging the federal forces to leave. The governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, he called it a campaign of organized brutality. And the mayor of Minneapolis, Jacob Frey, was even more direct. He told ICE, and this is a direct quote, to get the fuck out of Minneapolis.
And all of that brings us to today. Right now, we are locked in a super tense, pretty much unprecedented standoff. This isn't just about protesters versus agents on the street anymore. No, this is escalated. This is now the city of Minneapolis and the entire state of Minnesota squaring off against the full power of the United States federal government.
So, as of today, January 15th, the fight has moved from the streets into the courtroom. And honestly, it could escalate way further. First off, the state of Minnesota is taking the pretty incredible step of suing the Department of Homeland Security. They're trying to legally force an end to Operation Metro Surge. At the very same time, the ACLU has jumped in with a class action lawsuit claiming that federal agents have been engaged in racial profiling. And then, kind of hanging over all of this, is the biggest threat of all. The president has now threatened to invoke the Insurrection Act. That is a rarely used law that would give him the power to deploy the U.S. military on American soil against American citizens. The stakes are incredibly high. So, that's where we are. This is, for all intents and purposes, a full-blown constitutional crisis. You've got a state fighting the federal government, and it was all sparked by a protest of conscience from inside the system itself. And it really forces all of us to think about a very deep, very troubling question. When the very guardians of the law, the people sworn to uphold it, feel like the only way to protect it is to resign, what happens to justice? What does that mean for the future of justice in America? Thanks for joining us for this breakdown. For more deep dives into the stories that are shaping our world, make sure you subscribe to America Current Affairs.